Kingzone Dragon X's bot lane, PraY and GorillA, are two of the most tragic figures in League of Legends history, which is bizarre because they're also two of the most decorated players in League of Legends history. Playing together, they've won 2 LCK titles back to back. They've made it to a Worlds final. They've been in the top 4 of Worlds twice. They've been in the top 8, the playoffs of Worlds, 3 times together. They have collectively topped 5 LCK regular splits, even separately when not playing together. PraY, when he was in Najin Sword, won OGN Champions Winter 2012. He was top 4 at Season 3 Worlds. He was top 8 at Season 2 Worlds. GorillA, when he was on the other side of Najin White Shield, he was in the finals of OGN Champions Spring 2014, often considered the most competitive and high-level Korean domestic split of all time. He won the Gauntlet that year. He made it to the top 8 of Worlds that year. Despite such decorated resumes, these guys are champions. They are two of the most iconic losers in League of Legends history. In the context that they were in position to win, to be number 1, to take all the big titles so many times, and they lost more often than they won. Now, in this video, I'm going to ignore any instance in which they were a good team, or they were in the playoffs of a Worlds, or they were in the playoffs of an OGN or an LCK. I'm only going to talk now about tournaments where they were either the best team or the clear second best and would have won if the best team hadn't existed, or played a close game against the best team, or lost to the eventual winner. So when you see how many times it's happened to these guys, you'll realize that despite their success, they've had very tortured careers. So let's start with the domestic league. OGN Champions, it used to be called LCK, now League Champions Korea. Obviously, it's the hardest league in the world to win because it's got all the top Koreans there. So Season 5 Spring was when we had the GE Tigers, their first ever split. PraY and GorillA team up for the first time. Obviously, PraY had been off in Najin Najin Sword previously, and then had like almost a year off. In the meantime, GorillA had risen up in Najin Shield, later Najin White Shield, had his own appearance in the finals of LCK. It was OGN back then. The first split, Season 5 Spring, in the regular split, this team looked unstoppable. They won 12 out of 14 of the best of 3 series. It's the first time we went to the LCK format. We used best of 3. Those 12 series they won, their total record, 25 games won out of 31 played. Unbelievable stats. They'd even beaten SK Telecom in the regular split. Then, because of the format, changes the LCK format, meant that first place in the regular split jumped directly to the finals. They were just sat in the finals waiting to see who would join them. And actually, it was touch and go who would be joining them in the finals, because SK Telecom at the time was still swapping in Easy Hoon and Faker, and even actually swapping in a jungler called Tom, who later played in China, for Bengi, who was actually having some issues and had big issues in Season 4 when SK Telecom hadn't been so good. And SK Telecom only managed to win 3 games to 2 against CJ, and obviously there was that epic game where Bang carried on Lucian, which no one will shut the fuck up talking about for like 3 years later. So SK Telecom makes it to the final. GE Tigers is the favoured team to win. They're expected to win the title. But what do you know? They managed to lose. They don't win a single game in this final. This is despite the fact that SK Telecom didn't even field Faker in the final, the best player of all time, and just fielded Easy Hoon instead, and 3-0'd the series. GE Tigers choked it away, looked pretty terrible. The same SK Telecom, by the way, went to MSI for winning that game, and they themselves lost. They lost to EDG in the final there. So yes, by the end of the year, SK Telecom was in such amazing form. They're actually often considered the strongest team of all time, that lineup. But at this point in time, they were beatable. They might not even have made it. GE Tigers looked unstoppable. Everything was going for them. They got rocked in the finals. Then you come Season 6 Spring, the next year. This is when they've upgraded. They've got Peanut through the door. They've got an amazing jungler, one of the best junglers in the LCK, into their team. Aggressive jungler, making up for the shit junglers they used to have. That used to be one of the clear weaknesses of GE Tigers / Ku Tigers / well, they became Rox Tigers. They had Peanut. Well, you know what? It was working amazing. In the regular split, first place again. 16 out of 18 best of 3 series won. 34 games won out of 41 games played. Unbelievable dominance. Sitting in the finals again. What do you know? SK Telecom's going to face them. And they lose 3-1 to SK Telecom. The same SK Telecom, by the way, who again had to change players. They'd had to bring in Duke instead of Marin, who'd left, and who hadn't even finished second in the regular split. SK Telecom was actually the team finished third in the regular split, below KT Rolster, who obviously had a pretty sick lineup. Then this is actually a different era. Actually, they didn't have the godlike lineup at that point in time. There's 2 LCKs they've blown. Obviously, they've won LCKs. Now let's look at Worlds, the World Championship, because these guys have been to many, many World Championships. So first of all, we've got to start with PraY before we even get to the PraY-GorillA combo. Season 2 Worlds, his team won the regional because at that point in time, Korea actually only got 2 slots for Worlds. They had the team that had won OGN Champions Summer, and so that was Frost. They automatic... no, actually, it's the other way around. Let me think. No, anyway, actually, I'm confused by that. Yeah, Frost was the number 1 seed, and then Najin Sword won the regional to get the 2nd seed, and in the regional final, they played, at the time, I think it would have been Azubu, right? Azubu Blaze, and they beat them in an epic 3-2 game series, and this was Blaze that had Reapered, the team that had won Spring, that had won the MLG Arena, stomping TSM, that had looked like a really strong team, made it to top 4 in OGN Summer, but had to face their rival sister team Frost, so they might have been the second team, best team there, who knows. They beat them, they go to Worlds, they get out of the groups. In the round of 8, they get drawn against, in theory, the easiest of the opponents who are the number 1 seeds in the playoffs. They get drawn against Taipei Assassins, a team that, yes, has potential, has some skill, had done a few upsets earlier in the year, but was not considered one of the favourites for Worlds. Who's the top laner of this Najin Sword team that PraY is playing for? It's Macnoon, one of the best carry top laners in the world. Yet they lose 2-0 to Taipei Assassins. And actually, famously, Stanley, the top laner of Taipei Assassins, has a fabulous series here. So there's one where they lose to the eventual winner. The hype actually coming in. You can go ask someone like Loco Doco, who's involved with the org. He'll tell you. This team was considered in practice one of the scariest teams. A lot of teams thought, how are we going to deal with this carry top laner? They end up losing. Who knows if they win that, what happens? They would have played Moscow 5, Frost in the finals. Who knows? They obviously went on to beat Frost in OGN. That's how PraY got his first OGN title right afterwards. Playing against Moscow 5 certainly would have been a very interesting matchup. Darian's a very unusual top laner. Certainly wasn't at the level of a Macnoon back then. You obviously had a phenomenal AD carry in PraY. Meanwhile, Genja, weird AD carry again. Who knows how he would have matched up. Now let's go to the next World, Season 3 Worlds. Now, Najin Blacksword, as they were now called, qualified purely due to circuit points, because back then they hadn't weighted circuit points more towards summer. And so since he'd won OGN Winter and then had a top 8 in the spring split, but then bombed the others, they still ended up getting the number 1 seed for Korea because along came SK Telecom, but they only came along in the spring, and then they didn't win spring. They hadn't played in winter. And then when they did win, they won in summer. And so even though they were the best team, they actually had to go through the regional. And obviously, famously, KT Rolster was the second best team in Korea, maybe the world, but they had to go through the regional. And so they also didn't win. And the other team going from Korea was MVP Ozone, the team that had won the spring split, and then obviously had a solid top 4 in the summer split. So Najin actually, again, got the number 1 seed, and not for the first time, rather, got the number 1 seed. But because they had the buy into the round of 8, because that used to be the format of Worlds back then, they were what you call a black box, because no one knew anything about them. They wouldn't scrim the other teams at the tournament. They brought their sister team Shield, who hadn't qualified with them, so they could practice in secret. And so coming into the playoffs, no one knew what to expect from this squad, who hadn't been that good when they'd been back in summer. And also, they'd brought along a different mid lane. They brought along Nagne to be able to sub in at mid lane. Now, in the round of 8, they actually had a really close game. They played against Gambit, who at the time had Voidal instead of Edward. It was a 2-1 series. It was a pretty fun series, but whatever. Najin Blacksword wins the series. They go into the semi-finals where they play SK Telecom. Best team in the world, best team in the tournament so far. SK Telecom has looked awesome at times in the group stage. Remember with them completely wrecking OMG in that second game. They've easily dealt with who was the team actually? Gamma Bears from Taiwan in the round of 8. And so no one's expecting much from Najin here, but no one knows what to expect. Ends up being an epic 5-game series. Nagne plays very, very well. Actually, Najin Sword certainly could have won this series if not for some amazing play by SK Telecom and particularly Faker with Orianna. And actually, when you look at the finals where SK Telecom completely shit on and rolled Royal Never Give Up, yes, that's what they were called at the time, with Uzi. And actually, a lot of people think OMG was the team that would have been best matched up against them. You can make a case that if they beat SK Telecom here, they probably win Worlds. And PraY wins Season 3 Worlds. And maybe they were even the second best team there. Arguable between them and OMG. And then I guess Royal Club, depending on if you want to go by the official standings. So then skip ahead. Finally, they're together. They're in what's called the Coup Tigers now by the time we get to Season 5 Worlds. Now, even though they'd had the strong spring split, the one that they'd lost to SK Telecom in the final, for the summer they were much more ropey, but they managed to win the regional. They go to Worlds, and even though they're beating out CLG, the top NA seed, I think they were top NA seed, whatever, they were one of the top seeds, they ended up losing 2 games to Flash Wolves in the group, but they go on to the round of 8, and they have to play KT Rolster there. Considered the second best team in Korea at the time because they'd lost the Champions Summer Final to SK Telecom, the one team that had Peekaboo in it, someday. Amazing team, actually. They beat KT unexpectedly in the round of 8, go to the semis. They play what the time was that amazing Fnatic team of 2015, the one that had gone 18-0 in the summer, had Hooney and Rainover, Reckless, Yellow Star, Febervan, amazing team. They 3-0 that team. It was close again. They looked in 3-0, but still 3-0 them. Go to the final. In the final, they play SK Telecom, the fully powered up SK Telecom, who at that point had not yet lost a game at Worlds. They're the only team to take a game from them, but they still lose 1-3. Now this one, listen, whenever you have a final take place, there's not going to be an opponent very often in a Worlds final that's 100% to win. So there was a chance, certainly, that Coup Tigers would have won this. I will say it's much less of a chance than some of the other tournaments I'm talking about. You also have to look at the fact that SK Telecom was amazing in that, especially in that meta as well. All their picks were amazing as well. So as a result, I think fair play. SK Telecom probably should have won that one. But you know what? Tigers should have won some of the past ones. These guys should have won those. So it's worth mentioning they were the second best team at Worlds there. In a world without SK Telecom, probably win that Worlds together. Season 6 Worlds comes along the next year. In the group stage, they have another weird loss because they lose to the wildcard team ANX from the CIS region, but they still get first place in the group. They play EDG, China's best team, in the round of 8. They beat them 3-1. In the semi-finals, they rematch against SK Telecom. They're actually the favoured team because they're the reigning LCK champions. They're coming in looking really strong. SK Telecom hasn't looked that strong. They only finished 3rd in LCK, that split. They go 5 games with SK Telecom. An epic series, a really amazing one. This is one of those series where I absolutely think either team could have won the series, and it's one of the all-time great series. I actually might pick it as the best series of all time. I think it's up there with stuff like Samsung Galaxy, Samsung Blue versus KT Arrows. It's up there with KT Rolster versus SK Telecom. This was the one that featured the amazing Misfortune support pick from GorillA. Great series. Just edged out by SK Telecom. SK Telecom goes on to win Worlds. They lost to the world champion again. Season 7 Worlds, another Worlds. This time, they don't get any strong teams in their group. There's no Chinese team, obviously no Korean team because they're the Korean team. They're the champions of LCK again coming in. They 6-0 their group. There's some close games, but they 6-0 it. Come into the playoffs, and they end up playing Samsung Galaxy in the quarterfinals. Now, Samsung Galaxy elsewhere hasn't even won their group because they were in the group with Royal Never Give Up, and they lost to Royal Never Give Up. And in fact, it even looked like they were going to lose the game to G2 and were somewhat lucky to perhaps even get out of the groups. Amazingly, though, in a reversal of fortune, Samsung Galaxy is able to win this round of 8 matchup 3-0, particularly with Cuvée having an amazing series against Khan, and Ambition doing some great jungling. And what do you know? The Tigers are out of yet another Worlds. In this case, it's actually the Longju team at this point in time, but the PraY GorillA connection. And if they were already the favourite to win the title at that point, SK Telecom had looked ropey, Samsung Galaxy hadn't been good. If Samsung Galaxy loses to them here, it feels pretty likely that they beat World Elite, and then in the final, they beat SK Telecom, who was in bad shape. Now, you could certainly make a case SK Telecom still to some degree were clutch. They had Faker. This team's shown weakness. Fair enough, but you have to figure they had a real chance to win this Worlds. Now, beyond those LCK, OGN, and Worlds, there are other international tournaments these guys have bombed as well, and in fashion where they were expected to win. So one of the most infamous is going right back to their time at the beginning of GE Tigers, which is the IEM9 World Championship, which would have been around March of 2015. So this was where they came into the tournament as the #1 team in the world, and the only other Korean team at the event was CJ Entus, who were kind of, eventually they went on the end of the split to be good, but a little bit busted up at this point in time. It was after the sister teams had merged, they'd lost Flame, they'd lost Ambition. I think they'd lost Ambition at that point in time. I got my timeline wrong on this one. Was he already in Samsung? I don't remember. So anyway, they came as the #1 team in the world because in LCK, which hadn't finished yet, they were 10-0 in best of 3 series. They'd won 20 out of 22 games. They'd beaten SK Telecom 2-1 at that point in time. They were running those sick Juggermore comps that no one could stop. They came into the tournament. They took care of Cloud9, good NA team. They took care of SK Gaming, the #1 European team. Into the semi-finals they go, and they're playing against Team WE. Now, Team WE at the time were ranked 12th in the LPL. They just changed their mid. Shie brought him in. I think they had Spirit as their jungler, but he was pretty much having to carry as a jungler. And despite being massively favoured in this semi-final, which is a best of 3, GE Tigers loses 2-1 to Team WE. They win the first game, looks easy. They've been styling on people throughout the tournament. People are thinking, right, they can do what they want here. And they try an arrogant pick on the second game. They pick Yasuo for Kuro as a mid laner. And if you know Kuro, he had a very limited champion pool, and he wasn't some mechanically strong mid laner. Because they thought, haha, we're going to style on these guys, they picked Yasuo, a pick Kuro had never played in an official LCK game or even in a preseason game. And what do you know? They lose the game. Shie, who now moves on to Ari, carries the game. Then, because at this point they were banning his Diana the whole series, then in the third game, Shie's on Ari again. Shie carries the game on Ari again. GE Tigers doesn't even make the final. Had they made the final, they would have played against Team Solo Mid, the one with Santorin, Dyrus, Wild Turtle, in a best of 5. So they were heavily favoured to win that and win the event. And this is a team which anecdotes tell us they had played in scrims, not only one, but Monte Cristo tells a great anecdote about how he watched them play a scrim against TSM, beat TSM, and then he asked one of the players, do you normally play that champion? He's like, lol, nah, I've never even played it before. So what a fuck up this one was. Obviously, you've got to bring up the most recent tournament, MSI 2018, where they had just won LCK in dominant fashion in Kingzone Dragon X. They'd gone 16-2 in series. They had won 33 out of 40 games played, and that's already incredibly dominant. And then you've got to add the caveat. The first series of that they lost was against KSV in the beginning of the split when Khan, their star carry top laner, was suspended. The second series was against BBQ Olivers, not one of the best teams, and that was when Khan played the first game, lost, was hyperventilating, and they took him out for their sub. So even the 2 series they lost weren't just straight up losses with their primary squad. So they come to this tournament big favourites to win the title. They already have a rocky group stage, but whatever, they get to the final. In the final, they play Royal Never Give Up, the best Chinese team, and they lost to Royal Never Give Up and did not win the title and looked unconvincing in their loss, quite frankly. So despite the fact these are guys who between them have 4 and 3 titles, they have lost so many big finals or big moments that were kind of the true final. These guys legitimately together could have 3 Worlds finals, Worlds titles, because they lost to the eventual champion in all the playoffs. GorillA could have 3. PraY could have 5 Worlds titles because he's got the 2 from Naj and Sword to add in. Collectively, they could legitimately have won 5 LCK titles, and separately, they each could have won 6 LCK titles because obviously PraY could have won, let me think which one. Which one extra for him? Well, he already has an OGN title, right? And GorillA, in theory, could have won when Najin White Shield made it to play against Samsung Blue in the OGN Spring Season 4 finals. I know people are going to go, no, they couldn't. Lol, that Shield team wasn't that good. They were. They looked really good in the playoffs, in the group stage. Then in the playoffs, they looked dynamite. Coming in the final, they were actually favoured by a number of people. A number of people thought they would actually win that, thought that Save would outplay Acorn. They thought that Goom, with his limited champion pool, but good champion pool, might be able to outplay Dade. This was never a done deal. So these guys could have most LCK titles as well. What's sad is, you look at them, what a great duo. First of all, throughout their careers, obviously their strength as this consistent bot lane that doesn't lose lane, plays safe but still gets through lane and gets to team fights, gets to the mid game, enabled some of the greatest carry tops of all time. Macnoon, Smeb, Khan, admittedly, obviously it was just PraY for the Macnoon era. Save, if you want to add, when it was just GorillA. Then you go and look at the fact they've always been good in team fights. They've had a shot calling elements to how they've played. GorillA has been out there innovating or perfecting new picks. His Janet in Season 4, Misfortune in Season 6. You think of PraY and he has his classic picks, obviously most famously Ezreal. In a world without Faker or SK Telecom, they win most of these LCKs. They win most of these worlds. In a world where they just win a close series that they were actually in, they win a lot more LCK titles, they win a bunch of worlds. You might think to yourself, since they did win 4 and 3 titles between, 4 for PraY, 3 for GorillA, you might think to yourself, okay, but if you do win and you do have a great career and you win a lot, will it really tear you up that much if you lose? You know, I mean, a lot of people would love to even qualify for Worlds or win one LCK title or even have a chance to win a Worlds and get to a Worlds final. Well, I can tell you, first of all, from anecdotes, the legendary NBA player Jerry West, he is in fact, his silhouette is the logo of the NBA, famously got to 10 NBA finals in the 60s and 70s. And he only won one of these NBA finals, and that was with the team that had the best regular season record of all time. Now, he actually said that even when he won that one final, it wasn't enough to take away the pain of all the finals he'd lost and all the times he would think about them and they would haunt him and he'd see one of the players from a Celtics or a Knicks team and he'd think, fuck, that should have been mine. And he won an MVP as a losing player in the 1969 finals. That's how good this guy was. In fact, I saw an article in which scientific study suggested that even just for sports fans, it's actually apparently 4 times more painful to see your team lose than it is to see them win. So you can make a case that these guys actually are the most tortured and the most tragic, because Uzi I might have been in 2 Worlds finals, but he wasn't supposed to win either of those. He'd been in a lot of LPL finals, but some of those he wasn't necessarily supposed to win. He wasn't even in LPL finals for the first few. So you've got to look at it and say, by having the chance to have won so much and been so good and been right there to winning them and lose so many more than they actually won, what a heartbreaking career. And then finally, after they lost this MSI final, I saw there was an InVen interview where PraY actually said, like, he didn't look at the reactions from the community or read any negative comments because it might affect his mental frame. And, you know, he apologized to the fans, didn't want to look at any reactions. I realise there are certainly some great players who don't look at these things, but you think of SK Telecom, you think of Faker, you think of the great champions in League of Legends. They tend to be people who embrace adversity, who get fired up more, who battle you to the absolute nth degree when they're in the most pressure stage, when people have been talking shit, people are suggesting they can beat them. So it does say something about the mentality of these players who are some of the greatest to ever play. You can make a case for each of them being the best player at their position of all time. And at one point in time, you actually, at the end of 2015, could have probably made the case for GorillA being the best player of all time. Monty actually did once in a video I did where we were saying that Faker was the best. He made a contention that it could be GorillA as well. So what a tragic career.
Welcome to Thorns and Thoughts. Unfortunately, I don't have any content. The man already speaks his mind, but I ain't gonna stop you now. I assume you saw a pretty fucking good video. Alright? And you're already on the man's channel. So stay a little while longer. I see you're comfortable. And just check a few more out.
This video was kindly supported by Dean Tanglis, Gardner Wilson, Andreas Snazore Westerlund, Alex Adams, Daniel Yordanov, TTMXMP, VeXii, HawpT, Robert Baxter and Travis Greb, with a special thanks going out to Jerky's Minion. Want teasers for my upcoming content? To ask a question for my monthly AMA? How about taking part in a discussion with me about esports? Or perhaps you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Become a part of the Scrilluminati today at the Patreon link in the description box below.